Hello. Hello, and welcome back to yet another college football video. The season is upon us, and I am here. I pondered, over what video to make following my top returning quarterbacks video. And I decided I wanted to talk individually about certain teams. And, you know, I have very limited time here. It's only like a couple weeks before the season starts. And I was trying to think, okay, how many teams do I want to cover? What exactly do I want to talk about? And I was thinking about starting like from the middle of the pack and working my way up, but I didn't want to risk possibly missing out on covering one of my top picks to win everything. So I figured I'd start from the top down. I'm going to start with the team who I think is going to win the national championship, and that would be the Texas Longhorns here. We are doing an individual team spotlight on what I think is the best team in college football here. So let's get straight into it. Thank you for watching, of course. Now, let me say this. I am not really one of those people who has some sort of innate hatred for Texas. I only started watching college football like 3 or 4 years ago. And when I started watching college football, Texas was fairly irrelevant. But like I could see that they were trending in the right direction. And these last 2 years, they've been nothing short outside of the cream of the crop, which they do have a bit of a struggle beating. But they're not like Penn State. It's not like they lose every big game. They do win more than their fair share. So we're going to break that down, of course. But 2023 was the breakout year. They made the 14 playoff. They beat Alabama in the regular season. And obviously their best season in who knows how many decades. Follow that up with this previous season, 13-3. They make the SEC championship game. They dominate the regular season, and they even win multiple playoff games. And those two teams they beat much more difficult than Penn State's two playoff wins, for example. And the question is 2025. We will eventually get to where I think they will end up with their 2025 record being. Let's look at what they were statistically in these last two seasons here. So let me adjust where my little screen, my face is at. All right. So offensively, I think we all know that Texas has a bit of a tried and true method. Steve Sarkisian is a proven offensive guru. I think he's earned that title. And that's been proven with these last 2 years of the Texas offense. They've been either top tier or just very upper echelon. I mean, they've been a top, what, 12, 13 offense the last 2 years, very effective pass game. The issue, I think, from 2023 to 2024 is kind of uh, it's significant because it leads to the overall issue with their team was the physicality aspect and them having a real issue with running the ball. First of all, it makes sense because who they thought would be their number one running back, CJ Baxter, went down with an injury. So they lost Jonathan Brooks from the 2023 team. Then they lost who they thought would be their starting running back before the season. So I kind of write that off as a pass. I think if they did have CJ Baxter, their running game would have been a lot like what you saw in 2023. So I'm not entirely going to put that on coaching or anything like that. I think it was understandable that they would take a dip in that category. Points per game also went down. I mean, they pretty much got worse across the board offensively from 2023 to 2024, which I mean, some people thought this would be the case because, them moving from the Big 12 to the SEC, a lesser caliber of defense in the Big 12, obviously. Texas would kind of get rocked a little bit by the sudden change in the level of competition. And they did turn the ball over. But here's the thing. They played, what was that, 14 games? They went from, let me see here, 1 second. They went from 14 games in 2023 to 16 in 2024. So they did play two more games, but they did have 8 more turnovers overall. So they did turn it over more often. And overall, I think Quinn Ewers was slightly disappointing last year. It feels to me as a outsider looking in at Texas that Quinn Ewers was always one step away from being a true elite, legendary college quarterback. He had a lot of good moments, but especially in the big games, I just never felt like he was able to take that next step. And maybe it's just because he was limited as a player. He had no mobility. He really struggled against the pass rush. It's just, there was only so much he could do. But he was still, a massive upgrade over what they had in the previous years. But I just didn't think he could really take them to where they needed to be. But here's the interesting thing for me. The number one story about Texas that I don't think enough people are talking about, they were arguably the best defense in the country last year. As a matter of fact, I might have given them that award in my 20 like in my end of season award show that I did. I might have given Texas the award of the best defense in the country because they were dominant in the SEC. Now, listen, we're going to get into all the teams they avoided playing in the SEC, but I mean, brother, top three in one, two, three different categories, top 10 in passing yards allowed. What was their worst category? They were top 15 in everything you see here. I mean, 31 takeaway. Now, of course, that again goes in the fact they played pretty much more games than anybody else in the country, but still, 31 takeaways is beyond impressive. That's seven more than last season. They only played two more games. I mean, it's just incredible. And look at the points per game difference 3.6 less points per game, moving from the Big 12 to the SEC. Now, I can kind of understand that some of the SEC offenses aren't as threatening in terms of what they're going to show you and throw at you than some of the Big 12 offenses. But still, I feel like it was an amazing shift for Texas. I don't think anybody in their like unless you were a Texas fan, if you asked people last year what was more impressive, Texas' offense or defense, I feel like everybody would have said their offense, but Texas really got carried in a sense by their. We're going to get into some games where if their defense wasn't as good as it was, they would have lost multiple regular season games. They only lost one, I think, but it was it was so impressive. And I feel like that's a trend that should continue because if you look at their schedule and the teams they play, if you didn't know, the SEC next season is going to play the same schedule as they did in 2024. It's just going to be flipped. So, if, like, for example, Texas played Georgia in Texas last year, now they're going to play Georgia in Athens. So, Texas' schedule was pretty light last year. It's going to be the same thing next year. So, I would expect them to have maybe not as a good of a defense because they did lose some star players, but I mean, brother, this was a dominant force last year and the driving factor of what got them to the college football playoff. Let's take a look here at some of the overall roster changes because uh, the consequence of consistently producing this much talent is that you are constantly having to replace that talent in the offseason because, typically they end up leaving you for the NFL. So let's just go through. Let's start with the amount of players they lose offensively. Right. 2023 or 2024 offense, you lose Isaiah Bond, Matthew Golden, Silas Bolden, Kelvin Banks, Hayden Connor. Let me make sure I'm looking at this right. Cameron Williams, both their tight ends, Quinn Ewers, and Jaden Blue. That's 10. That's either 10 starters or impact players on their just on their offense that they're losing here. How many starting offensive linemen from last year do they bring back? DJ Campbell. Is that it? Is that it? They returned one offensive lineman. That is that's really concerning, man. It really is. I mean, I'm concerned, man. Cole Hudson was a rotation player last year. Looks like he's going to become a new starting center. So I guess technically that's two, but it's like, man, I do. But here's the thing: I do give Steve Sarkisian the benefit of the doubt in this scenario. I understand that for most teams, losing that many players, having a new starting quarterback leads to a lot of question marks. But I just think it's going to work out for Texas. I mean, I love their running back duo. I think it's much better than what they had last year, quite frankly. Weisner kind of broke out, had like 1,300 yards from scrimmage, if I'm not mistaken. Now you get CJ Baxter back healthy from your injury. I do think Arch Manning is going to be an upgrade over Quinn Ewers. I don't think that's a hot take, but I just feel like people really don't understand how limited this offense was because they had no aspect of mobility from their quarterback. I just think Arch Manning, with what he can do with his legs, but also just being more prototypical with his size, his strength, I really do think he's going to open up this offense to some new capabilities. And I do think they're going to take a massive jump. We saw what the numbers looked like with their run game last year. I expect that to take a massive swing in the other direction. I wouldn't be shocked if they're a top 10 run game in the country next year, which needs to happen because that physicality aspect is what hurts them in these big games. Their group of receivers, I mean, this is going on the third year in a row where I think they're going to put multiple receivers into the NFL draft this year. As a matter of fact, I don't even think that's possible because Ryan Wingo won't even be eligible, and neither will Emmett Mosley. They got Mosley as a freshman last year on Stanford, of all teams. This transfer guy, Mosley, had like 500 yards and six touchdowns. I think he'll be real interesting in the Texas offense next year. DeAndre Moore, though, I expect him to go and get drafted in the first two rounds. I think he'll look very, very good here for Texas next year. And Yeah, man, I just think it's a real talented wide receiver core. I like their group of running backs. The biggest concern is the offensive line. I have massive question marks. You lose both of your starting tackles. I think you definitely were expecting to lose a guy like Kelvin Banks, but Cam Williams leaving, that really hurts because, I mean, in hindsight, obviously hindsight's 2020, wasn't he like a sixth round pick? So it's like in his case, I'm sure he wishes he returned to Texas. I mean, but it is what it is. You lose both those guys. You only return one starting offensive lineman. It's going to be rough next year, but they're going to have to figure it out some way somehow. And but yeah, like I said, the offense was not even dominant last year, so it's like they can't get much worse by Texas standards. So I just expect them to look really really good next year. And then defensively, obviously. There's some talented guys you lose. Alfred Collin, Vernon Broughton, Baron Sorrell. Obviously, what's his name? Jade Barron being just the best guy here, just in general, right? You lose all those guys. But you do return multiple starters in your back end. Anthony Hill and Colin Simmons come back. You still have wait, I'm trying to find him. Trey Moore. Where's Trey Moore at? Oh, they have him listed as a backup of all people. So I mean, they have a real talented defense yet again. I believe the strength of this defense, though, is going to be their front seven, their linebacking core, their pass rushers. I think that's going to be what propels them into yet again being one of the better defenses in college football. Moving on, we can see their last 2 years of their schedule, wins and losses, things of that nature, and what they have to go through next season. Let's talk about a little bit here. Let me talk about the big games. I've mentioned that a little bit here so far, but let's talk about what I mean by that here. If we were to look at, let me see here. I'm trying to get this thing off my screen 1 second. If we were to look at their eight, that's an arbitrary number, their eight biggest games the last 2 seasons, right? Count with me here. Obviously, all three playoff games, the SEC championship against Georgia, so that's four. You have the first Georgia game in the regular season, that's five. Let's go to last season, playoff game against Washington, that's six. The Oklahoma Red River game definitely was way more important than this year because if you remember, in 2023, that was the 10-win Oklahoma team with Dylan Gabriel, one of the better teams in the country, in my opinion. So that's 11 right there. Or sorry, that's seven. And then the Alabama game in week two. That is their last eight biggest games, in my opinion. They are 3-5 in those games. Now, that's not awful. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I mean, that's not good. It's really not good. I mean, that's what isn't that LeBron's finals record? So I mean, think what you want about that, but I mean, I don't think that's very good. But dude, here's the thing: it's not like they can't hang. Look at the last season, right? Oklahoma, Washington, extremely, extremely close games. This season, the Georgia game and the SEC championship game, really close. The Ohio State game, really close until obviously the pick six or the fumble recovery, whatever it was. The only game that they've really got manhandled the last 2 years was the Georgia game in Texas. And that was, of course, a physicality aspect. And that's why I think they're just a step behind, especially last year. Georgia, both the Georgia games and Ohio State, they lost the line of scrimmage in all of those games. Um, that's what has to change. But the question I have, can it change when you have four new starters on the offensive line? Major question marks right there. But here's the thing: looking at the next season, right? Obviously, week one on the road at Ohio State. I have to clap it up. That is one. Obviously, I understand this was scheduled like years, like in the past, right? But the way things line up to go on the road to the defending national champions is one of the most ballsy, impressive things I've ever seen. So if Texas manages to win that game, they will be golden. They will be the crowned jewel of college football until they have to play Georgia in week like what is that, 10 or 11, maybe even week 12. They will be coasting until that point, right? Because those are the two biggest games, right? You play on the road at Ohio State and on the road at Georgia. Those were the only two teams that beat you. All three of your losses came from those two teams, and you have to play both of those teams on the road next season. The storyline is insane. And quite frankly, there is no way. I don't care how good you think Texas is, there is a 0% chance they win both those games, right? So, whatever order you think they drop those in, I don't really care. I have them going 1-1 in those two games. If you just look at the rest of their schedule, please tell me where the tough games are. San Jose State, UTEP, Sam Houston, all at home, by the way. They are going to dominate. Just they're gonna put meat on those poor three teams right there. On the road at Florida, That's interesting. I would assume a lot of people are probably picking that as their toughest game outside of Ohio State and Georgia. But I'm not low on Florida, but I'm not nearly as high on Florida as to think that they could really compete with Texas. It'll be an interesting game. I'll watch it for sure, but at this point, I'm not really confident into be able to say maybe a month into the season, my opinion will change. We'll see how Florida looks, but at this point in time, I'm not willing to say that's a tough game. Oklahoma, yet again, it's here's the thing though. This is the start. That Florida game is the start of a month-long road trip. They will not play at home for a month after the Sam Houston game, maybe even longer actually. So on the road to Florida, then neutral site against Oklahoma. I just last year's game was so they're so one-sided. Obviously, I do think Oklahoma is going to be one of the most improved teams in the country. So yet again, I believe it's going to be on the same level of difficulty as the Florida game. Maybe they'll be a little beat up from the Florida game. Who knows? But I do think Texas is going to be a heavy favorite in that game as well. So I'm just not confident in picking Oklahoma in that game. On the road against Kentucky, one of the easier SEC games they played last year. I'm not worried about that at all. Mississippi State, probably the worst SEC team in the country last year. Again, I'm not worried about that at all. Here's an interesting one. Keep an eye on this game against Vanderbilt. Now, listen, you might think I'm crazy for acting like Vanderbilt is tougher than on the road at Florida or neutral site against Oklahoma. But here's the thing look how close the Vanderbilt game was last season. It was a 3-point game. Now, it was in Tennessee. I understand that. However, the thing about the Vanderbilt game and next year is that they haven't played at home in a month. They are coming off a month, maybe they probably have a bye week in there as well. A month plus long stretch of not playing at home. They're probably going to be beat the fuck up after that stretch. They finally come home. Does Vanderbilt catch them sleeping? I'm not picking Vanderbilt to win this game. But if I had to pick one game besides Ohio State and Georgia that Texas is going to lose, I think I'd pick that Vanderbilt game. Maybe I probably am in the minority there, but I just think the stars are kind of aligning for that to be a real massive upset there. And it wouldn't even be because it was an incredibly close game last year. But yeah, keep an eye on that one. Obviously, then you go to Georgia and your last two home games against Arkansas and A&M. Listen, neither of those are easy. Both of those were 10-point games last year. However, both of those were on the road in favor of Arkansas and A&M, and I do believe Texas is going to get better than both of those teams. So again, I can't pick either of those teams. I'll say this: outside of Ohio State and Georgia, Texas will be heavy favorites in every other single game, and for that reason, it is a light schedule because their toughest game, in my opinion, Week 1 against Ohio State, is not even an SEC game. It means nothing to whether or not they make the conference championship. And yet, this is 2 years in a row now. Let me tell you, to all the teams they avoid playing in the SEC the last 2 years, they don't play Alabama. They don't play LSU. They don't play Ole Miss. They don't play South Carolina. They don't play Tennessee. So, excluding Texas because they can't play themselves, they avoid five of the last six, or sorry, five of the six toughest teams in the SEC. So it's like, listen, you have to give Texas credit. In the last 2 years, they have not lost a single game to a bad team. They have not. They have dominated lesser competition in the last 2 years. You have to give them credit for that. But at some point, it's like, brother, like how long are you going to avoid all the tough teams? Because here's the thing. They were 0-2 against the only tough SEC team they played. So it's like, on one hand, yeah, you're dominating competition. You look really good. But on the other hand, every time you play a tough team, especially last season, you fold. So I really don't know. I'm struggling here with how good Texas could really be because then let's say let's just say hypothetically, they beat Ohio State, lose to Georgia again, right? So they're 11-1 going into the SEC championship game and let's say they play Georgia again. At this point, it'll be three straight losses to Georgia the last 2 years. Do you really think they're going to beat Georgia in Georgia in the SEC championship game? I don't know, man. I don't think anybody could confidently pick Texas in that scenario. So this is what I will say: if they lose that road game to Georgia, does that kind of put a wrench in my whole plans? Because how do you lose 3 times in a row the last 2 years and then beat them in the SEC champ? I don't know. It's a real. But here's the thing: my opinion on Georgia. We'll get to them when we get to them. I do not think Georgia this season is good enough to beat Texas 2 times in the same year. Last year, I think they were able to do that. I don't feel the same way about Georgia this year. So It's tough, man. It really is tough, but I do have Texas making the playoff regardless of whether or not they win the SEC championship game. But for the sake of the argument, I'm going to say Texas loses the SEC. The SEC. So I think they're going to lose to either Ohio State or Georgia in the regular season on the road. Then I think they will lose to Georgia, Alabama, whoever you want, South Carolina. They will lose to one of those teams in the SEC championship game, either Georgia or Alabama, most likely. So I think heading into the playoffs, they will be 11-2. Will they get a first round bye? No, because that only goes to conference champions. Is my thing off here? Is my predicted record off? Will they have to will they have to take the Ohio State path then in that scenario? I think they will. I think my predicted record is off here. So they will be, let me make sure I understand this right. Heading into the playoffs, they will be 11-2. They will then have to win, like Ohio State did last year, four playoff games to make the national championship, or to win the national championship, rather. I think they'll do it. I think they can do it. So my predicted record then is now been updated to 15-2. I believe Texas will go 15-2 and win the national championship here. I was off there when I was making this video here. But yeah, it's not going to be easy. I mean, they're going to have to. How many games? I mean, for what Ohio State did last year is so impressive in hindsight. But I mean, will it happen 2 years in a row? It's almost tough to imagine, but I think it could, man. I think if any team in the country could do it, I think it's Texas. So yeah, man, that's just how I feel at this point in time. Let's take a look here, last but not least, as the kind of Venn diagram here of what to look for this season in Texas. Let's start off with their weaknesses here. Is the lack of physicality, the new offensive line. How is that going to look like? Obviously, it was their kryptonite last year, and it kind of comes as a result of their philosophy. A lot of screen passes, a lot of trick plays, a lot of, making the defense guess. But when it comes to just short yardage, Texas 4th and 2. Are you confident they can pick that up? I'm not. Especially, are you confident they can pick that up with a run rather than some sort of trick play, screen, something like that? I just don't think Texas is confident in themselves when it comes to the physicality aspect. Big games, obviously, we know. I broke it down for you. 3-5 in their 8 biggest games the last 2 years. They have to get better when the lights are the brightest. And also losing 12 draft picks this past season. All the new guys on the offense. It's not easy. It's certainly not easy to replace that amount of production, especially now with the transfer portal era. It's going to be difficult. You're going to have losses somewhere, but I think they can survive. The question marks. Arch Manning. I already said I think he'll be better than Quinn Ewers. But here's the thing: there's a difference between being better than Quinn Ewers and being a Heisman level player. A lot of people think he could be a Heisman level player, and I don't disagree. I think with the system and his skill set, it's very possible. But how good does he look in his first year as the first year as the starter? I mean, that's probably the biggest question in all of college football, really. Because if he looks like a Heisman, Texas is favored to win the national championship. So, Mazer, um, fucking with my brain. Major question mark right there. The new offensive line, of course, already went through this here. 4 new starters on the offensive line. That's going to lead to issues no matter what happens. And also, your first game being against Ohio State with 4 new starters, that sounds like a recipe. And also, who is the breakout weapon on this offense? Every year, it feels like they have a receiver who makes a name for himself and kind of plays himself into the first round. Is that DeAndre Moore this year? Could it be C.J. Baxter coming back from injury? Is Quintarian Weisner going to continue his trajectory towards, being maybe a 1,600 yard back from scrimmage next year? Who knows? Who is that guy? And the strengths here. Offensive coaching, we know it's been proven. They have a system that works, that dominates lower levels of competition. Too many weapons offensively. They are able to replace, find, and just give their quarterback a plethora of options to choose from with both the receivers and the running backs and their front seven defensively. It is what, if they are going to be a top 10 defense again next year, it will be because of their front seven, in my opinion here. So that is going to be it for this video here. My first team spotlight on what, in my opinion, is the best team in college football. Please leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you are new, and I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.